Their friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project. That is executive producer of the show, Huck L. Berry. Hey, Huck is a good girl. Yeah, she's a good girl. Yeah, she's a good puppy. Good girl. Yeah, she's a good puppy. Yeah. She's a really good girl. I am very lucky she's in my life. We try to take care of each other. And she's going to make sure that we do a good job for you today, talking about the case. And we've got a good one for you. So, thanks. And a reminder that if you've got a case you want us to look at, send it to missing411@yahoo.com. Books, posters, DVDs, missing411.com. And that is a new website. Please check it out. We're selling the movie posters, the DVDs, Blu-rays. We have Missing 411 The Hunted on DVD again starting December 1st. So we're going to be filled up with a new book too, December 1st. Everything starts December 1st, and we'll get them out as quick as we can for Christmas. I want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing the segment we're doing today. Back when I first started to do the research into Missing 411, I realized that there is something very strange here. I started to look at all the different things that were happening. We have people found in water. We have clusters of disappearances in water. We have hunters that have gone missing. Berry pickers, mushroom pickers. All these people haven't been found. And then we have a category of small kids. At the time, Ben and I sat together and we said, how could we educate the public and allow them to grasp this in 90 minutes, that there is truly something unusual happening? And we agreed that if we did hunters and fishermen and berry pickers and mushrooms, it would be this shotgun approach and no one would really get a good grasp on it. But since most of the audience has been a kid, has kids, or is around kids, people have a pretty good grasp on what a child's ability might be. So what we decided to do was do the first movie about kids. And it was titled just Missing 411. And you can watch it right now on Tubi for free. It was directed by Ben. Now, in that movie, we picked out children that have disappeared under very unusual circumstances and a subgroup of kids that have traveled phenomenal distances. Now, it's pretty funny. When I do one of these about a child that traveled a phenomenal distance, I'll get adults saying, oh, my kid could have done that. Yeah, right. Or, I knew a child that could have done that. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, it's not just the child doing it. It's the circumstances of how the child did it and how the child lived under the circumstances that they were presented with. It's the totality of that that really makes the case interesting and hard to believe. So we have manuals that are given out to search commanders that tell you the parameters by which to search by based on flat ground, desert, mountains, etc. And then a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, this is how far they'll be found at, or the maximum distances they'll be found at, which are totally wrong. I've proven that over the years, but they don't care. They just keep printing the same stuff. So the real question is, In your mind, how is this happening? Well, that is the million-dollar question. Because either the children are too young to explain it, they don't have a memory, or they don't survive. So there's never really a good way to do it. And in the rare instances when a child is found after doing this phenomenal distance, there's usually nothing in the reports or in the reporting that talks about the condition of their feet. And many times they don't have shoes. So it's hard to determine, well, if their feet were in perfect condition and they walked over rocks and shale, you know they didn't walk over rocks and shale, right? Now this case involves a young boy, Donald Peckham. Donald at the time was 5 years old on April 16th, 1908. This is a picture when Donald was 3 years old. This is the only picture that they put up about Donald at the time. Kind of looks like a girl, but they said this was a picture of Donald. It was in a big newspaper in Nevada. And he lived in a city called American Flat. Well, he was staying in a city called American Flat outside of Virginia City in Nevada. The elevation of American Flat was 6,000 feet. So hold it right there. 6,000 feet is high in elevation, folks. Most people could not run 400 feet at 6,000 feet without dying of exhaustion. So as you hear this story, keep that in the back of your mind. Now, Donald was the son of a man named James Peckham, who was a pretty famous guy in this area of American Flat in Virginia City. See, James had an important job. He was one of the main assistants to the Attorney General of the state of Nevada at the time. Now, on April 16th, 1908, James and his wife put Donald staying with his grandparents on American Flat. And American Flat was about 2 miles from Virginia City. So here's American Flat right here. Now look at what's just almost right next to American Flat. Devil's Gate. Doggone. Important things to remember on this. Virginia City is up in this area, and Mount Davidson, which we'll talk about in a minute. Got it? But remember, that name comes up a lot in the locations we look at. Remember, I wrote a book called Devils in the Detail? Missing 411, The Devil's in the Detail. And how many locations have the word devil in it? And the question is, how did that location ever get that word? And the resolution to that is, most of the time you never know. So his parents drop him off at his grandparents' home. He has a grandmother and a grandfather that live there that are both mobile. The area around this is desert. No big trees, ground cover, bush, nothing big at all. You could see miles through that desert. And there's hills just to the east of there, and there's nothing on the hills except little scrubs. So the average temperature in April when this happened, highs would be in the 80s, and the high being the lows being the 40s. The average high about 61 degrees. The low temps, 20s. The high point for the lowest temps, 50s. The average low about 34 at night during April. Now, if you've never been to Virginia City, I suggest you go. It's fascinating. It's the home of a famous mine called the Comstock Mine. And the Comstock Mine gives a great tour. It's worth going. I went with some friends and we all had a blast. It's a step back into history, but it's a cool kind of history. Even if you don't like mining and stuff, they have really good exhibits. So, April 16, he's with his grandparents. And what happens is that on April 18th, the Oregon Daily Journal runs an article stating that a boy had become lost looking for a rabbit in American Flat, Nevada. Article doesn't say much more than that. Same day, there's an article in the Reno Gazette, which is just down the road. And it states that a boy was staying with his grandparents in American Flat, and he took a walk with his grandpa. And they were hiking along the Virginia and Truckee railroad tracks. And the boy, whose name was Donald, became tired and started walking back towards his grandpa's house, saying he wanted to go back. Grandpa turned around with him, started to walk back towards the house, saw that Donald was within steps, and the grandpa turned around and started doing some other things. Understandable. Seems all reasonable. But as you know, if you're missing 411, when two people go their separate ways and they don't have eyes on each other, that's when something happens. We call that point of separation. And it happens repeatedly. Now, the railroad that they're talking about runs right through that valley up towards Reno. That valley today has a huge population in it as you go south. It's a very popular area. It's a nice area too. Well, after less than a half an hour after the grandfather loses sight, he didn't lose sight, he turned and walked away, but thought that Donald was in the house. The grandfather walked in the front door and saw his wife, the grandmother, and said, "Hey, where's Donald?" Grandmother says, "He was with you." And the grandfather says, "No, he was walking in the house." She said, "He never walked in." Well, the article at the time stated that in the back of the minds of the grandparents, since the grandfather didn't see him outside when he came in, that Donald must have fallen in one of the many mine shafts in that area. Now, this area had a ton of mine shafts. Now, I'll give you a map of this here. So the map I just showed you a minute ago of Mount Davidson. So here's a map today of the streets and the highways in these areas. And each one of these little mine picks is a mine. And you can see how many of them there are. It's loaded. Little holes in the ground that sometimes are very deep that haven't been capped. Ripe for a young boy to fall in and never be seen. And that's immediately what they thought. Well, they both were diligent people. They jumped, ran outside, started to look. They immediately walked around their house, walked around the area, got people that were friends of theirs involved, said we need to get more people involved right away. They had others make contact with legal authorities, fire and police in Virginia City. And eventually, the cavalry started to come. Well, the grandparents searched that area up, down, and sideways. The entire railway yieldway between American Flat and Virginia City was searched continuously. People rode it on horseback through the desert, and when they were sitting on horseback, they could see for many miles when you're a little up off the ground. Then they rode the other direction looking for Donald. One of the closest cities to the grandparents' home was a place called Gold Hill. Residents there were contacted and asked to help if they saw anything. Just in case Donald walked the opposite direction, they were searching everywhere. And if he would have walked that opposite direction, he would have gotten into a place called Silver City, where they contacted more people. And then what others did is they gathered up loose brush from the valley. They rode up to the top of small hills around them, and they built fires. Kids are interested in fire. It's warm. And at night, they kept those fires burning, hoping that he would see them and walk towards them. Smart. That's exactly what they should have done. Now, many of the people involved were looking for tracks, clothing. They found nothing. There were no tracks in the dusty dirt of that desert floor. Donald hadn't been stripping any of his shoes or his clothing. There was nothing. Within hours after word got to Virginia City, James Peckham arrived back at the grandparents' home with his wife, and they took a paramount role in the search. 48 hours after Donald was missing, they still hadn't found any tracks leading anywhere. None of his clothing, none of his shoes, and most of all, nobody in any of the surrounding homes had seen a little boy walk by. Nobody had seen anyone strange. Nothing had seen anyone unusual. They thought maybe a mountain lion or a coyote. Nobody had seen anything, and there were no tracks of any. So they didn't know this at the time, because this is only something in the last 30 or 40 years that has been developed, but search and rescue guidelines for a 5-year-old that's missing. They're found 95% of the time in a mountain environment, 2.3 miles or less from the point they were last seen. Now, regarding elevation gain, do they walk upwards in elevation? They're found 95% of the time at 1,303 feet higher in elevation or less. Meaning 95% of the time they're found in an elevation less than that. So they're not climbing much. They stay mobile for an average of 4.3 hours. And survivability under 24 hours is 98%. So most survive up to 24 hours. Under 48 hours, it drops down to 33%. So American Flat has an elevation of 6,000 feet. Virginia City, 6,148 feet. And again, I'll reiterate it to you. Moving at 6,000 feet is a heck of a lot different than moving around at sea level. It's entirely different. Volunteer searchers continue to pour into that area from Reno, Carson City, and from Story and Washoe County, Nevada. More seasoned law enforcement people were absolutely puzzled because none of the fires that were burnt attracted the boys' attention, and nobody had seen them. They surmised that someone somewhere should have seen him walking across the desert by this point. One of the biggest mountains in the area was a mountain called Mount Davidson, with an elevation of 7,838 feet. And it was approximately 2 linear miles from his grandparents' home to the base of the mountain. So this is a U.S. Geological Survey partial map. Mount Davidson, 7,838 feet. A mountain right next to it, 7,664 feet. The valley floor down here, so there's 6,100 elevation, so it's about 6,000 feet. So he has about an 1,838 foot climb. The closer these contour lines are together, the steeper the mountain. As you can see, these are very close together, which means this is very steep. And it's steep all the way around this mountain. Very steep. Gotcha? All right. So, with the consistent failures of the search and nobody seeing anything, James Peckham requested that the searchers start climbing those two mountains in the hope that it would give them a better view of the valley to see their son walking down below. Good strategy. So a group went up each mountain. Again, look at the mountains online. There's no big timber. There's no big ground cover. They're only covered with really small bush. And James decided to go with the team that was going to the tallest mountain in the county, Davidson. So they got up at the top of the mountains very early one morning. Now, there's no road to the mountain. There's not even a trail up to this mountain. This was 1908. But what there was at the top of the mountain was a flagpole. Kind of had the command view of the whole valley below. So the elevation gain from the valley floor to the top of the mountain was 1,838 feet. As the searchers and the dad got close to the top of the mountain and the flagpole, they saw something, in the words of the newspaper, huddled at the bottom of the flagpole. As they got closer, it was Donald. Articles stated that Donald trampled at least 12 miles and climbed over 1,800 feet almost straight up the side of the mountain. That's what the article stated. And they stated he died of thirst and hunger. They said that he appeared to be asleep when he was found. When they said he traveled 1,800 feet uphill, that is fact. But nobody walks straight uphill, especially a little boy. Part of that mountain, you'd have to be on your hands and knees as an adult to get up it. So how did he get up it? Now, if it was 1,800 feet straight up, you could legally and guess and assume that he traveled at least double that, maybe triple that distance as he meandered his way up the hill. But did a boy at 5 years old have that much wherewithal to make it up that hill? How did Donald get to the top of that mountain at 5 years old? Now, he had to have crossed almost 2 miles of the valley floor on top of that. So first he crosses the valley floor at 2 miles. Then he gets to the mountain and he goes, it's very steep. Then we go back to that point of separation. How did he get out of his grandfather's view that quickly when you could see a great distance across the desert? How does that make any sense? And I've stated this before, and I get a lot of conflict from people online saying, oh, you know, that's a non-point. I think it is a point. This is another incident where the father wasn't there at the house when the boy disappeared. Now let's pretend that you are Donald and you get to the bottom of Mount Davidson. And let's just say you want to climb it. I don't know why you'd want to climb it, but when you're at the bottom of that hill, it's so steep, you can't see the flagpole up there. You can only see the flagpole when you're back a long distance. What would be the point of climbing that mountain? Because after crossing 2 miles of land, don't you think he would have been really thirsty? And then he's going to go climb that mountain? Unfortunately, nothing I could find stated what he was or wasn't wearing when he left or when he was found. And those are critical points that I wish had been available, but they aren't. Now, a lot of times you guys ask great questions on the videos. I truthfully give you all the information I can. You ask why this, why that, or why didn't they do this? Great questions. I have no idea. Now, in this instance, they didn't say who the doctors were that examined him. If an autopsy was done, they just listed the cause of death. Who knows how they did this? It was 1908. Nobody saw the boy on the summit ever until the searchers got to it that day. Now remember, there are thousands of people in that valley that are looking at that flagpole every day. You think maybe they would have seen a little boy walking around up there and reported it? Well, just maybe. Now the key point to all this. This was in many articles. It said that the searchers at the time stated that they didn't believe Donald could have climbed Mount Davidson by himself. And as you're standing up there, you have a commanding view of the entire valley. So, if this was the 21st century, you would have had motorcycles, ATVs, 4x4s that all could have made that trip to the top. Could have hit a body in it, driven up, and dumped the body. That dog don't hunt in this case. There were none of those things. And I do not believe that somebody on the valley floor is going to put Donald over their shoulder and climb that mountain and then dump his body there. That is ridiculous. Too easy to be seen, too easy to be arrested for murder, if that was the case. But that wasn't the case. Nobody saw that. So the question comes down to only a couple things. Donald climbed that mountain, got to the top, and died. Possible? I'll let you be the judge. This is one of those more extreme cases. Based on distance traveled, elevation gained, lack of water, lack of food, lack of witnesses, point of separation, father not on scene. This is one of those real whodunits, folks. And this is one of those cases, if I would have known about it at the time, I probably would have put it in that first movie. And then we would have walked the route that Donald would have had to have walked. And it would have been blatantly obvious to you that he didn't do that. Because what else is on that valley floor? A whole lot of rattlesnakes. And you know what happens in all of these cases where kids are eventually found? They never get bit. They never get injured by an animal. Ever. How is that possible? Ever. Well, the only way it's possible is if they weren't on the valley floor. They didn't climb that mountain, etc. Now, the people that were there on scene are the best judge of really what happened. And when you would have looked at the clothing he was wearing, and there was no mention of what he was wearing or what he wasn't wearing, but if he would have climbed that mountain, he would have been dirt, just absolutely covered with dirt all over the front of him. Why? Because he would have had to have almost climbed that mountain on his stomach. So friends, it's one of those cases I want you to really think about. I'm not making a mountain out of a molehill. People that were there said he couldn't have done it. I greatly appreciate you being here. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I bet you I've put up 500 people who have stated in the last couple of months they were subscribed, and then YouTube pulled them off and they weren't subscribed. And they haven't been getting notifications for months. Well, if you haven't been getting notifications and you're on the sidelines, you don't even know you're not getting notifications. When you send me, hey, I'm here, I can get notifications, well, that's great. You're not the one I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get to the ones that don't even know they're not getting notifications. And if we have close to 500,000 subscribers, and we're only getting 30,000, 40,000 people each video to watch, we have 1/10 of our audience watching. That's ridiculous. Something is really wrong. Okay, Dave, hold your taters. Don't get all upset. I'm not. I'm just saying facts. The Huck's laying here starting to snore. I hate to have you hear that. So, be safe. Be kind. Kindness is king. Kindness is free. And it's contagious. You are being kind by being here right now. So thank you. Be safe. Paulides out.